So what we're going to do for starters is I would encourage you to make a folder. So go to your file folder, or not your file, your folder. Go to your folder. And in there, I would make a folder called Automoblox Car. Okay? I would make an actual folder. So if you don't know how to make a folder, you click on the blue Create button and you choose Folder. And I would make one called Automoblox Car. Okay? I would everything we make, I would have in its own Automoblox folder within your personal folder because we're gonna have a lot of different parts here. Okay, we are gonna make these. I mean, you can see these ones from last year that I made. All right, we are gonna basically make each part. I'm gonna show you guys some different techniques to do this. Okay, let you cook on that. But yeah, this is what we're doing. I'm gonna put all my older ones from last year. I'll put all my older ones from last year in an old folder. I don't want to get rid of those, but I'm gonna make a new one. So I make a new document, and I'm calling it passenger section. So what we've gotten so far, right, is I have in my personal folder, right, I've made a folder called Automoblox Car, and then each part we make is going to be its own file within Automoblox Car. Some people have decided to make a single document for this, and they put each part in a tab. I'm not going to say you can't do that, but I'm going to discourage that for this one. I would actually make each one its own separate document. Okay? Are we good? Maybe? Possibly? All right. Did you have a question, my dude? You good?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay. So we're going to make the passenger section. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw this profile here, and we're going to extrude it. Why are we not drawing this side instead?
It's rounded.
I mean, it's rounded, right? Like, it just doesn't really make sense to. This is a profile that you can draw, and then it's just a straight shot. If you draw a rectangle, you're then going to have to go back and round these with fillets later on, right? It's just a waste of time. So we're going to draw this surface right here, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sketch on the front plane. Which plane?
Front plane.
Front plane. Okay? I'll make a sketch on the front plane. So I made a sketch there, and I'm going to line it up so I'm actually looking at the front plane. We should know how to do this by this point. This would be something we're good with. Any questions or issues before we move on? Because I don't want to lose people, but like, if you're not doing your job, I can't help you. Okay. Now, I want you to think about symmetry here. There is symmetry, is there not? Yeah. So we probably should use a center point rectangle. So that this plane here, I know it looks like a line right here, but it's really a plane. See if I turn it, the plane, okay? It'd be really nice if that cuts the shape in half, right? Because the car is symmetrical left versus right. Not necessarily top versus bottom, but it is symmetrical left versus right for the most part. So I'm going to do a center point rectangle. So I'm going to click on the drop down arrow next to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to choose center point. And I got a rectangle. Now at this point, what are your workspace units? It kind of be obvious. If you got big numbers, you're probably in millimeters. If you want to work in millimeters, that's fine. If you want to work in inches, that's also fine. If you don't remember how to change your workspace units, you can click on these three lines up here. Go to workspace units. So if you don't like what they are in, you can change them. I'm going to continue with millimeters for the rest of the day and for the rest of this project, but if you want to work in something else, that's fine. As a general rule, you should be putting the numbers that you get. I mean, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make actual measurements, but you should be putting the numbers that you get on your thing. We understand? Yes, yeah? Yeah. Okay. So I got a rectangle. Now, how tall, wide, whatever, with this rectangle are we looking at? Well, first thing I want to do is I want to take my calipers, and I want to close them. Okay? Don't hold them closed. Just close them, let go, and then you push 0. We understand? Yes, yeah? Yeah, we're good? Should be in millimeter mode, by the way, if you're not already. You can just keep hitting that mode button on the left toggle. And I'm going to measure the dimensions of this. So when you open up the calipers, you got 2 pairs of teeth. So these teeth down here, the bigger ones, they go around things like that. Do we see? They go around stuff. Yeah, we're good? The ones up top, if you notice the edges that are straight are on the outsides. Those are for fitting inside things. Make sense? Yes, say yeah? Mm-hmm. So the big ones go around stuff. The little ones go inside things. Are we good? Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the width. Now, my recommendation to you, do you see what I'm doing here? I'm exaggerating this. If you see I'm at an angle, you want to avoid that. Now, I know that I exaggerated this, but I mean, how do you make sure that you're perfectly straight and not at an angle? One thing that you can do is you can do it near an edge, so I can make sure that my calipers are flush with like a surface to help make sure it's straight. Make sense? Yeah? So notice what I'm doing here, right? I have it around the shape, but I have it flush with the top or the bottom of my thing I'm measuring. That's a little trick you can use to help ensure that that's straight. And for me, I got 81.41. Okay, look. A millimeter is not very large, right? Do you agree? A millimeter is not very large. A tenth of a millimeter is even smaller. A hundredth of a millimeter? Bro, if I sneeze on this thing, it's going to change by a hundredth of a millimeter. So my recommendation for you is when you're doing your measurements, I would not go to the hundredth of a millimeter. I would go to the tenth or even a whole millimeter for these larger things. Now, smaller things, maybe going to a tenth of a millimeter makes sense, right? But for these bigger dimensions, I mean, I would not get caught up in tenth of a millimeter. So I got 81.5. The last time I did it, I got 81.4. I'm going to do it one more time. Seems to be 81.6. 81.5. Okay? I wouldn't get too worried about the exact number. So I'm going with 81.5 as my width. So I'm going to dimension that. The dimension tool is right up here. Right here. Here's the dimension tool. 81, 82, 81.5, so around. Questions? All right, go measure the height. Should you be able to do that yourself? What? Yeah. Go measure the height. About 38.6. These are wood. Wood is not a perfect material. So you may find with wood that if you were to measure the width on one end, it's not exactly the same as the other end. It might be off by a millimeter, but I wouldn't worry about it, okay? This is learning how to make CAD, not to like actually recreate this thing perfectly. So my height for me is ballpark-ish, 38.6. Okay. Do we have questions? Now, for me personally, I would round the corners in the sketch because it's an extrusion. So I want to get this profile correct, and then I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to round the corners. Now, we don't really have a great tool for measuring this, but we're going to assume that these are parts of circles. If you look at them, you might notice that they may actually appear almost more like part of an oval, if that makes sense. But we're going to just assume that they're parts of circles. So how do you estimate the radius of those? You ballpark it. So you can just take your calipers and kind of open them up and just sort of put it on there and kind of try and capture, how big the curve is. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my calipers and I'm like lining up one edge of the calipers with the edge of the wood, And I'm kind of ballparking the other edge to be about where the wood transitions from being curved to being flat. And it's a little ballparky. But it looks like it's somewhere around 9 or 10 millimeters. You know what? I'm going to just go with 9. Okay? We good? Yeah? So now I have a radius for these roundings, which we call fillets. So I'm going to go to the fillet tool right here, sketch fillet. You can click on a corner to apply a fillet. You can click on all 4 of the corners. Notice how they're orange. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see the blue preview, right? And after you've clicked at least one, your mouse will actually have an icon that looks like your mouse. Then it'll have like a green check mark by what's basically the left mouse button. Okay? So that's telling you that if you make another left click, right? I selected things with the mouse, but if I make another left click in open space, it's going to confirm the selection and move on. We understand? Yes, say yeah?
Yeah.
If I don't like my selection, undo, go do it again. Okay? I didn't like my selection. I go to sketch fillet. Okay. Left click on the corner. Notice how now it's ready to proceed if I click an empty space. But if I select things, it continues. It lets me continue selecting stuff. And then I get the green check mark and I click. And there's a box here, the dimension. I said 9. Let's just ballpark and say it's 9. Now, one thing I would do is I would be intelligent with where you place your dimensions. I would place them in a kind of an organized way so they're not like I don't want to do this. See how that number is covered by part of the symbolism for the dimension? That's not good. All right. Usually you want them in the middle or something like that. You don't want them right on like lines and stuff like that. That's really hard to see the number. We don't want that. Okay. We have questions before we move on. All right. Well, you can now extrude. You should know how to do this. Okay. One mistake I see a lot of people make is they start trying to draw like this cavity. But this cavity, does it extrude all the way through that cavity? No. So it's not part of this. Okay. If you have 2 different things on the same surface, but they don't have the same height or extrusion depth, don't make them in the same sketch. Most of the time, you want to make them in separate sketches. All right. So I'm going to get basically my depth here, and I got 80.8. Going with that. I'm just going to commit. I'm going to go with that. 80.8. Now, I don't personally see much reason or value in my mind. I don't see much reason or value in making this symmetric because the car, frankly, is not symmetric this way, right? Like the front and the back of the car are different, right? So when I look at it like this, left and right are the same. Top and bottom, though, not necessarily. Front and back, not necessarily. So don't assume symmetry where there is none. So I'm not going to do a symmetric extrusion. There's no point. I'm just going to do a blind extrusion. And we have the passenger section. What should we do before we move on? Rename it, right? So I'm going to call this, you could call this whatever you want. But the golden rule is choose an intelligent name. Maybe I call it the main body. I'm not saying that's the best name, but I think it makes sense, right? Choose a name that makes sense. Don't be putting Skibidi Rizzler or Sigma Baka or something stupid like that. No one's going to know what that means. Now that we've done the overall body, we can do these 3 cavities. Now, hypothetically, this wood piece was made, and then they put these plastic inserts in, right? Yes, yeah? But we aren't able to actually take this plastic out. So we're going to treat this all as a single piece. We good? Yeah? For the most part. So I'm actually going to make this cavity here with the 2 squares and this one with the rectangle. So for me, the one with the rectangle is actually facing the front. The front goes on that end. I can tell because the front piece, this is clearly the front piece of my car, is where the squares are, and then the rectangle goes on the other side. So, yes. So I'm going to do the rectangle on the front. So we're going to do the front cavity together. That should be that should be the same for everybody, the front cavity. It's all the same rectangle. So I'm going to make a sketch on the front surface. Now, I said don't assume symmetry where there is none. But if there is symmetry, you should use it. I want you to look at this cutout. Does it seem centered?
Yeah.
Does it seem centered horizontally?
Yeah.
Does it seem centered vertically?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's really true, then what we can do is we can do another center point rectangle, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, this is a hole. So when measuring something like this, we're going to use the top teeth, all right, because they go inside stuff. So I'm going to put my teeth in there, and I'm going to measure the width. Now, be careful. If you go drag your teeth all the way to the very edges, those corners are rounded. You don't want that to mess up your measurement. So you're going to have to put your teeth kind of in the middle, okay? And just try to do your best to make sure it's actually straight. Maybe try and line it up with something else, all right? I'm getting up somewhere around 50 something, 57.7 is what I got. Well, you got to do both, so there's no matter what you do both. So I got 57.7. I'm not saying that number is perfect. Who knows? All right. So I got 57.7. 57.7. There, easy, problem solved. And I'm going to do the height. Make sure you're zeroing every time you make a measurement. I got 20.7. There, easy, problem solved. And now I'm going to round my corners. Now I'm going to round my corners.
Okay, Tom.
You're going to have to ballpark your measurements.
Looking pretty good, Tom.
You're going to have to ballpark, oh, thank you. You're going to have to ballpark those fillet measurements. Just do your best. Ballpark. I'm thinking 2.5. I'm going to go with 2.5. So I'm going to click on my fillet tool right here. Corner, 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 click, and I type the number 2.5. And I'm going to move my dimension thing just so you know it's easier to see. Any questions? Questions at all? We're good? Okay. So now,
Wait.
Shut up. Yeah.
wow, rude. You good, man?
Yeah.
Okay.
50.5.
What? I don't know. You measure it yourself. You use your numbers. All right, I'm going to extrude that. I'm going to cut. So I got to use this remove tab. Yes, yeah. I got to use remove. So I'm going to remove. Okay. Now the depth. How far do I go? So, little fun fact here. Good calipers have a hole measurer or a depth gauge. Check this out. Look very carefully. Watch the bottom down here of my calipers. 1 to 1. I move the teeth an inch. This thing sticks out an inch. So, when you want to measure the depth of a hole, you take this, you put it in the hole, and then you bring the calipers back down until they rest on the lip of the hole. I got 11. Do it one more time. Extend this, set it where you want to measure the depth of the hole, and then just bring them back down until they rest on the lip. Okay, I got 11 again. So there's actually 3 different ways a basic set of calipers makes measurements. So there it is, 11. I'm going to call this front cavity. Could call it front hole. I really don't care. I'm going to call it the front cavity. Now, in that cavity, there is a rectangle. Do we see that rectangle? Yes, say yeah. If you pay attention, though, that rectangle is not level with the top of this surface. So that's why I didn't draw the rectangle in there and cut around it. I'm going to have to draw it, redraw it, and extrude it back up because it's not the same height. So I'm going to draw a rectangle inside here. Okay? I'm drawing a rectangle. I'm in the bottom of this. Okay? Down there. And I'm going to draw another rectangle. Does it look centered?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just assume it's centered then. And I'll get my measurements. Okay? How wide? Well, you get your calipers and you get that number. How tall? Get your calipers, get that number. Looks like 40.2 maybe. And then the height, 7.1. So we got 40.2. That's not what I wanted. And 7.1. How high up do I extrude that? Well, I would have to use my hole finder thing, my hole gauge, to figure that out. For me, I'm getting about 7.6. All right, we'll continue this tomorrow. We'll let you do the back of the car.
Yeah.